Okay, but you have 132 pieces that are missing, maybe 12 that you've recovered. So that brings us to 120 that are still unaccounted for. You have a list. You therefore know the artists of these pieces. Have they been notified?
So
that this has been happening for quite some time. We have a storage facility that was very insecure in terms of gaps within security protocols and otherwise. But has anybody been held accountable for the failures along the way?
So they are not categorized as missing. They are categorized as unaccounted. It is different with respect to the designations.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. The Vatican's going to send over 62 pieces. It's been in the news lately from Indigenous. Would you be in charge of that when it does arrive?
It's still so confusing to the public. If they were listening to this meeting today, trying to figure out how $14 million worth of art, a bunch of it goes missing. It's almost inconceivable that would happen at the National Gallery, obviously.
Word salad, right? A refusal to refer to really what's going on here because you don't want to use certain words. But at the end of the day, there are 132 pieces that are unaccounted for according to the audit. Has any initiative been taken to recover those 132 pieces?
We owe it to these artists to tell them, probably sooner rather than later.
Is there a question?
Well, would you agree with that?
Well,
I know you said six.
I think the artists' interests are.
I would think that would be something that would be up front.
But we are not in a place where we would be able to share specifics with the committee.
Okay. Ms. Gideon, would you agree to go seek a legal opinion on that and return that legal opinion to this committee along with whatever you might be able to table in terms of that list of unaccounted works?
A legal opinion.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Welcome to meeting number 14 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, October 29th. This committee is meeting for the consideration of the audit of the Indigenous art collection. We have with us today from the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Valerie Gideon, Deputy Minister, Rob Wright, Associate Deputy Minister, and Stephanie Barozzi, Chief Audit and Evaluation Executive.
All right. Well, sure. My first question here then is to Ms. Gideon. There are 5 recommendations that were given with regards to the action in the action plan outlined in the audit. The planned implementation for those 5 recommendations was March 31st, 2025. You're saying things are well underway, but according to a March 31st, 2025 deadline, they shouldn't be well underway. They should be completed. Why aren't they?
So we do have a number of actions that actually have been completed.
That have been completed. I'm asking why there are some that have not been.
Right. So in terms of the first recommendation, we do have a draft of the policy document clarifying roles and responsibilities, and we expect that to be approved certainly prior to the March 31st, 2026 timeline that we've adjusted in the Management Response Action Plan. We have signed the contract with our third-party storage suppliers, so that action has been completed. And we are continuing to work with Public Services Procurement Canada on the next storage facility after 2027, when we will have to vacate the Tunney's Pasture Goldenrod facility. So that is something that we are working very closely on with PSPC. In terms of the biannual report to the corporate secretary, so that is going to be completed by next month or January 2026, and an annual report to the deputies is going to be institutionalized by March 2026. But I can assure you that I do meet regularly with the corporate secretary who reports directly to me. And that we also have had discussions and presentations about this audit and the Indigenous art collection on a regular basis at our senior management committee meeting. We have completed the baseline cost analysis, providing various scenarios for the third-party contractor for the storage facility, and we have completed the fact that that cost analysis would be updated every 5 years. So we are continuing to work on, we've instituted the security cameras. All of that has been completed, and we have drafted new standard operating procedures. And so
Ms.
final
Gideon,
approval of
in the-
those will
in
be
the
by
interest of
March
time,
2026.
I'm going to move on. I think what's clear, though, is that there were recommendations that were signed off to be completed by March 31st, 2025, and in fact, they have not been. In fact, they will be completed, you're saying, not until spring of 2026 and maybe even beyond. I do think that there's some answers that are needed further there, but I don't know that we'll get those today. Ms. Brosey, are you able to identify the pieces that are missing? You said in your report that there's 132 that are unaccounted for. Do you know which pieces those are?
I do not know which pieces they are. In our audit, we were provided with a list of what was called unaccounted for, and they were for various reasons, and we were told that some of them were missing, but we did not do any further audit work on it because the value was not as high compared to the rest of the collection, so we focused our work on the pieces that were in inventory and in the vault.
Okay, so Ms. Gideon, are you aware of which of the which pieces these 132 missing artworks
So we do
are?
have an inventory of those that are identified as the 132, and the work of the team continues with respect to being able to determine some of these are duplicate records, right? Some of these are based on when we transitioned in 2010 to a new information management system. Some of them have been located. So we have at least 12 pieces that
So-
have been located. 20 are reproductions of existing artworks, so we do have a list.
Okay, but you have 132 pieces that are missing, maybe 12 that you've recovered. So that brings us to 120 that are still unaccounted for. You have a list. You therefore know the artists of these pieces. Have they been notified?
So just to say, in terms of the unaccounted pieces, because we are following the Category A Federal Heritage Collection rules of procedures,
With
we
all due
are
respect,
not.
actually, you're not following that because, as it was mentioned in the audit, there aren't proper security cameras. There are 3 pieces that were damaged by water. There's no temperature control. None of this is according to protocol for a Type A, for a Category A.
So we did receive.
So I'll go back
category-
to my original question, Ms. Gideon. Have you identified which artists' pieces are missing? Have you told those artists? That's my question.
Under the Federal Heritage Collection rules and procedures for Category A, which we have received an inspection of the current facility that has validated the Category A status, the pieces have not been, technical terminology, en français, alienation, deaccessioned. And so we are not notifying because the pieces are not deaccessioned. So, and I wanted to also correct the fact that 20 are reproductions. They are not the original pieces of art as well, and that also needs to be factored into the total assessment.
So sorry, deaccessioned, is that the word you're
That's
using? And
correct.
what does that
That's
mean?
correct. So that is where the piece would be identified and categorized as missing with certainty. These pieces have not yet met that threshold.
And how will you determine whether or not they are missing with certainty?
As we continue to work on the inventory and continue to get information with respect to the location, if we are not able to confirm the location, then at that point, they would be under the deaccessioned categorization.
Some of these pieces have been missing since 1980. How many more years do you need? It's been 40.
So the unaccounted for would not be since 1980.
According to the minister's testimony, she said it was since 1980. So either she's misleading us or you are.
I was sitting next to the minister. The minister was indicating that these pieces, some of these pieces, were loaned during the 1980s to different regional and headquarter offices. She was not indicating that they had been unaccounted for since 1980. They were part of a loan program which was completely suspended in 2017, and that had an earlier moratorium because of the fact that a review had been conducted by the Canadian Conservation Institute that had indicated that an internal loan program provided too much risk to the collection. And as a result, that loan program no longer exists and has been discontinued.
The audit raises the possibility that the Indigenous art collection may no longer be best housed within CERNAC. Has the department conducted an analysis of whether an Indigenous-led organization or museum institution is better equipped to steward the collection? And if not, why has this not been prioritized?
We have been having regular meetings with a number of different national institutions to explore just the feasibility and the viability levels of interest. But we have not yet launched a more formal process. And part of that, of course, is, as I noted earlier, the very strong priorities of First Nations and Inuit and Métis leadership and wanting to keep pace with those. But we have certainly been increasing the number of conversations and meetings that we have had in the last few months.
I'm not sure you've given this much thought as of yet, but what criteria would you use to determine whether retaining or transferring the stewardship would best support Indigenous cultural sovereignty?
The first criteria would be acceptance by Indigenous artists. The majority of Indigenous artists that are represented in the collection, I mean, that is a difficult threshold probably to reach, but I think it is a necessary one. And then, of course, the storage capacity, human capacity, the ability of resourcing and funding to make sure that the integrity of the collection can be maintained. Those would be other criteria that I would use to assess the future of the collection. But it wouldn't be just me alone, of course, making that decision.
Fantastic. Mr. Wright, and the Deputy has spoken to this already. I'm curious, the audit identifies 132 unaccounted for artworks, some possibly missing, yet also notes that there is no clear policy governing timely recovery efforts. What specific actions has the department taken to locate these works? And why was no recovery protocol established earlier, given the cultural value of these pieces?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam President. So I think one thing that's very important, and the Deputy mentioned this, we are going through a reconciliation process. So 12 of the 132 have been identified as duplicate records, and 20 have been identified as reproductions. And part of the reason of the timing of that, and the Deputy Minister mentioned that there was a legacy internal loan program, which was terminated in 2017. And so items were returned between 2017 and 2023. The pandemic was in the middle of that return. So it's really in recent years where this reconciliation process has been able to be rectified. And so we are going through that process now. And I think it's also important to note that of the unaccounted for artworks, it represents an assessment value of about $49,000 of the overall collection value of $14.4 million. So about 0.34% of the overall value of the collection. So that helps to put it in context, I think. And as far as standard operating procedures and protocols, the team is working on that rapidly, and this process of moving to deaccessioning items is one of the elements that's being worked on now.
Thank you.
Minister, or Deputy Minister, the audits picked up on a number of gaps within the handling of these very valuable pieces, one of which was governance. And at the time, there was no clear senior level accountability to this collection. There was nobody that actually reported to the Deputy Minister. You have said that is now fixed, correct? You've actually got someone reporting to you about this collection.
So there was always, in the Indigenous Arts Centre for several years, the director of the Indigenous Arts Centre would report to the corporate secretary, who would report to the deputy minister. So that is still the structure that we have now. The issue is that the director of the Arts Centre position has been vacant for a few years. So the corporate secretary has ensured that an executive within the corporate secretary is now also helping to support that team. But when Rob and I started in the department, we did have someone who was acting as the director of the Arts Centre. We were hoping that that individual would become permanent in the role, but the individual decided to move on for another opportunities, and that happens in the public service.
We still have some pieces that went missing that we didn't find out about until an audit actually happened. And this has been happening for a while, as the minister pointed out on Monday in committee in INAN, that this has been happening for quite some time. We have a storage facility that was very insecure in terms of gaps within security protocols and otherwise. But has anybody been held accountable for the failures along the way?
So when you complete an internal audit, as part of the Management Response Action Plan, you actually identify who the senior leaders are that are accountable for each of the actions in the action plan. And ultimately, that action plan reports not just to the deputy, but we also have a departmental audit committee that will review the progress with respect to the action plan commitments that are made in the audit. And that's also why these audits are public.
So has somebody been held accountable?
For this particular audit
Correct.
that is in place?
For the result of the audit. Like you have
So we are
around 10
accountable.
employees.
Yes.
And over $1 million in budget to look over a collection that's missing over 100 pieces. Some of them are recovered, yes, but there is some gaps here with a lot of zeros behind these numbers. Millions of dollars. Has anybody been held accountable for these failures?
You specify what dollar value you're referring to that are millions of dollars?
You can talk about the 900 pieces. You can talk about the number is 50,000. The entire collection is worth 14 million. Regardless of what this number is, there are pieces missing, worth money, worth value to people who created that art. This doesn't happen in the National Gallery, as was pointed out by the block before me. Who has been held accountable? Has anybody?
So just to correct that the pieces have not been identified as missing.
Held accountable.
They have
Anybody
been
fired?
identified as unaccounted.
Has anybody been fired?
No, no one
Has
has
anybody
been
been
fired.
suspended?
No one has been suspended.
Has anybody been maybe told to come into the office 5 days a week as the ultimate penance?
I think that the purpose of an internal audit and the reason that we do risk-based audit is to proactively identify areas of risk so that management can put in place actions to remedy those risks.
Okay, so this would not happen in the National Gallery. So it's just to say some pieces have gone missing. It's okay. Why has nobody been held accountable?
Again, the origin of the collection began decades ago. The purpose of that collection was not to set up a national gallery. It was
You're
to
storing
set up
these pieces. You take responsibility for these pieces.
Which is why we have changed the way the art has been managed. We have suspended the loan program internal that was the source of why many 91 of these pieces became
The minister
unaccounted.
talked about it in the 80s. You got the IAC in the 90s. Like, this has gone on for decades. We have missing pieces. Nobody's being held accountable, whether current, past. When are we going to see somebody, take accountability and say, yeah, this was my fault? This should have been better. I know you're putting in process. I get it. We have a storage container by a third party here. Was there even a contract with that provider?
Only 8% of the artworks are in that third-party storage. And we have repatriated a large, almost all of the artwork now in our vault, including repatriating all the pieces that were still held in regional offices.
Would you have done that if not for the audit?
We were already doing that before the audit.
You were already
Thank you.
We have been doing that for
Schmill,
years.
your time is up.
Can you talk a little bit about how the department, and maybe this is a question for you, Valerie, but how the department today is ensuring that Indigenous protocols, spiritual care, and community input guide the preservation and exhibition of sacred or culturally sensitive works?
Thank you so much for the question. And I would say to you, I think that we can do more. There's a lot of engagement with Indigenous artists with respect to the collection and their own art within the collection. But I really think that in the area of governance, from the question that was raised earlier, there is more that we could do. For example, we are working on a public catalog of all of the artwork that people could browse through. We published just before the pandemic, the Indigenous Art Collection, a beautiful book that actually you can go through and actually see all of the artwork. But I think that we could do more for the visibility of the collection. We've had a gallery space in our permanent facility at 10 Wellington, which of course we've now had to temporarily move out of because they are doing a refurbishment of the exterior of that building. And, but that gallery itself, even when we could reopen it, I think it's one area that we can do exhibition. And we have a really robust external loan program, which is also very helpful. We also engage Indigenous artists and Indigenous curators to do workshops and to do special events. And we've got several success stories that we can speak to. We've done partnerships also with other museums and galleries in that context. But I think, as I was mentioning earlier, I think ultimately an Indigenous-led approach to the governance of the collection would be more ideal than me speaking to you here as the representative person responsible for the management of the collection today.
So do you have any idea who has the art that is missing, that has been borrowed, of the 120 pieces? Do you have that?
Yes. So
Okay.
we have, so just to give you, obviously not list item by item, but in terms of, we know that we have 48 artworks that were part of regional and headquarter displays. We have 9 items that were part of regional displays, but 2 of them are reproductions. We have the specific years. So the first set of 48 artworks were between 94 and 2004. Between 2005 2006 for the night items. So I'm just giving you an example.
Okay.
But we do have documents in
Yeah.
categories
So have they
by
been
year of where they
contacted?
were.
So have they been contacted? Let's say I had an art piece in my office, I leave, and all of a sudden that art piece is missing. Have you reached out in the last number of months to connect the piece, where it was, and who had it?
We already had proceeded with respect to repatriating all of the artwork from regional offices to bring them all into the vault. So they were, all the offices that had held artwork were contacted, and they were directed to actually bring or send back the artwork, which was a complex logistical process, in order to be able to repatriate them back all into the vault.
So those that didn't get returned, and you do know who had it last, have you contacted police about this? Have you started the search professionally, going to the police and saying, that piece is over there, we're not hearing from that group or that person, we need to get that piece back? I mean,
No indication at all of any type of theft or criminal activity associated with this process. This is a documentation process, and we are continuing to go through the inventory, but we have had absolutely no evidence that anyone appropriated this artwork in an inappropriate way.
So how many pieces have been brought back? You've just said, I think, 132 missing. You've recovered 12. Do you have an idea out of the 120, even though 20 are reproductions, do you have an idea on the other 100 then?
So we know that 91 were part of this internal loan program. Some were part of regional displays. Some were part of headquarter displays. Some were part of regional and headquarter office loans. So we do have a drilled down list of those categories.
So if you reached out to any of these groups to find that 100 that were left, unaccounted for now, what are you going to do to recover the 100 pieces?
So we are looking at the records that we have in order to be able to, in first order, is to confirm which ones are duplicate records.
Know that.
That is part of the transition that we did in 2010 to the new information system.
You should know what's missing. It wouldn't take that much.
Again, they are not categorized as missing. They are categorized as unaccounted. It is different with respect to the designations.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. The Vatican's going to send over 62 pieces. It's been in the news lately from Indigenous. Would you be in charge of that when it does arrive?
No, we don't have a role in the repatriation of the pieces from the Vatican.
Okay.
That was something that was negotiated with other partners. We have not been implicated, but I did see the National Chiefs engagement at the Vatican and so forth, but we were not called upon.
Thank you. That's good. I don't know about the value, because when I look at Indigenous art today, it has tripled in value the last 5 years. So when you give me the number of 49,000, I really question that. You look at Indigenous art in this country, like I said, it's tripled. I look at Alan Sapp pieces that probably came here for $3,000 are now $15,000 hanging in certain offices. So I don't know where you're getting this number of 49,000, but I can tell you it's low. You've got 14.4 million that you suspect is the total amount that you have, but I'm going to really question the 49,000 that is connected with the missing 100 pieces that we don't know where they are today. Would you agree with me on Indigenous art? It is the hottest.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh.
It is the hottest.
Mr. Jumba?
We talked about the unaccounted for pieces. How many artists have been notified that their pieces may be unaccounted for?
I'm not aware of any notifications that have gone out.
Okay, are you planning, or you or your department planning to notify these individuals?
If we receive certainty that we are unable to account for the piece, then we would have a responsibility to notify the Indigenous artist.
What is your target for recovering or identifying the unaccounted pieces, the 100 or so that are still unaccounted for?
I don't have a specific target at this point.
Are you setting a deadline on when that might happen? If you aren't able to find them in a certain amount of time, say 6 months or a year, then notifying those artists that their pieces may be missing at that point?
I think it's a fair point, and I do think that it's something that I will take back to the team to see what their best advice is around setting up that time frame.
Okay, so are you going to table that to the committee? What you come up with here on your timeline? Are you?
We will have to consult our parliamentary relations folks to see what their advice is on that point.
You could let us know right now if you wanted.
No, I will consult.
You're going to consult. We're going to continue consulting. Okay, so given the fact that we've had, according to page 19 on the audit report, a number of previous audits here. Okay, now going back to my other question that I started with when I asked if anyone was suspended, anyone was fired, or anything else that had happened. It looks like the department had some idea that there could be risks associated with the collection, there could be issues of damage or potential fixes. If not made, you would have, pieces that would deteriorate. This goes back to like 2013, if not before. And nobody picked up on it along the way. It just kept all the way through. And yet we get to here, we have 10 people in tasked with looking over this collection at a budget of 1.2 million. And we've had decades where these problems have gone unanswered. And at what point does someone get held accountable?
So actions were taken after that 2013 review that you're speaking about around the Canadian Conservation Institute to significantly improve the storage facilities. And as I mentioned before, this is where the official suspension of the loan program, it was informed by that review. So there were several actions that continued to be taken in order to be able to not just not follow through on those review recommendations. The recommendations have been and continue to be followed through. There have been investments in terms of the storage facility to ensure that, as I noted, it is evaluated as meeting the Category A designation as well as the RCMP secured storage protocols. So there were actions taken.
There were actions, but we have these missing pieces that went around for decades as well. So I'm still a little, I guess, still a little just thrown off here that we haven't got to the point of letting the artists know that their pieces might be missing. Because I think there could be some value to the artists, the creators themselves, and the fact that they believe that their pieces are being held properly by the government, and then they're just unaccounted for. They're gone. I think we owe it to these artists to tell them, probably sooner rather than later.
Is there a question?
Well, would you agree with that?
Well,
I know you said six.
I think
you'll
the
have a
artists'
timeline,
interests
but
are.
I would think that would be something that would be upfront. That would be something. Well, maybe we should let these people know now rather than coming up with another strategy for it.
Team has been working very diligently to ensure that when they communicate with the artists, that they have reached a conclusion of certainty that they are not able to account for that artwork. So they take that responsibility very seriously.
So in the records where, as Ms. Thomas was talking about, you have kind of the last known individual or group to sign out a piece, how many more do you still have to go through? Left to go through? You have 100 still. I'm going to focus in on the 100. How many more have you gone? Like, is there 50 left and you can't find the other 50? What number are we looking at?
So I'm trying to understand sort of the question. So I think like we have already identified what pocket of time and the number of artworks and where they were situated. So right now the team has been very focused on assessing what could be duplicate records, and that has been a big part of the focus that they have now.
It's still so confusing to the public. If they were listening to this meeting today, trying to figure out how $14 million worth of art, a bunch of it goes missing. It's almost inconceivable that would happen at the National Gallery. Obviously, this is Indigenous art. It's very valuable. Walk me through again what happened here. Where did it go missing from? Giving addresses. We just want some basic answers, and we need it in plain talk as well, plain English.
Sure. So for decades, the collection was established in order to purchase Indigenous contemporary art in order to place it in federal offices across the country. In that context, it was not established as a gallery or as a museum. And so, after several decades of this evolution, there was, of course, a modernization of the approach to identify that the artwork was of value and needed to be repatriated and safely secured and meet designations that would be relating to a federal heritage collection. So that was an evolution.
Let me just interrupt. I'm sorry, but I think the public wants to know how could this art just go missing, and why have you not been able to identify where most of it, where the missing stuff is?
So I think the public would say that over all of these decades and the incredibly significant national contemporary Indigenous art collection has been preserved, with over 5,000 Indigenous art pieces valued at $14.4 million, and that the government is committed to continuing to work with Indigenous artists to preserve the integrity of the collection, and has also provided economic benefits to Indigenous artists.
You're not answering the question. Can you just tell how could this valuable artwork go missing, and explain again what you're doing to recover these pieces?
So they are not missing. They are unaccounted for. And we are continuing to look at the documentation that has evolved from paper-based files to information systems, digital records, over decades, long-standing decades of the building of this collection over time. Again, a very small proportion, less than 1% of the collection.
Madam, how can something be missing that you can't find and not be missing? That's complete doublespeak.
These are the categories that are set of unaccounted pieces, which means that we are looking at the documentation of their precise location. There is no certainty that we will not be able to identify those pieces or that they are not duplicate records. Until that threshold is passed, the designation is unaccounted.
And it sounds like doublespeak to me. How come nobody's been disciplined for this terrible, these pieces that are missing that aren't really missing in your view? How come they haven't been disciplined? Did anybody even get a memo? Like an angry memo from the boss?
The reason that internal audits are conducted is for departments to proactively identify areas of risk so that we can proactively mitigate them and address them. An audit is not intended to be a punitive exercise in the system. It is intended to support quality improvement.
When you look at the audit and you find out that somebody screwed up, then is it not your duty or somebody's duty to say, come in here and explain yourself? And if you can't explain yourself, maybe you're looking for a new job.
Again, these artworks were loaned, the majority, in the 1980s in regional and headquarter offices. That was the intention of the collection. The department has now since modernized the approach to repatriate artworks and to store them in an RCMP standard and category A vault. The redress has occurred.
Speaking of the RCMP, why haven't police been notified about the artwork that you can't find? You can't find it. Isn't that the job of police to investigate things like this? If I steal this chair and walk out with it, do you think the RCMP or somebody might be interested in talking to me?
A piece of artwork that was legitimately loaned to an office in the 1980s and repatriated in 2017.
Legitimately returned, was it?
It was not a criminal
that's your
intent.
time.
So how do you rebuild trust? Has there been kind of a difference in the relationship given this? And is there an exercise in rebuilding trust between those artists and your office and what you in the collection?
So thank you for that. So I myself have not been contacted by any artists that have raised questions with respect to the relationship with the art collection and the art center. We maintain relationships with 560 artists across the country. We have received a lot of positive feedback about the art collection and the art center's work in terms of, again, not retaining copyright, providing significant economic benefits to artists, like $5.6 million has been provided to Indigenous artists as a result of the way in which the art collection is maintained. The external loan program is very robust and engages the artists specifically in terms of where artwork is loaned and ensuring that they receive revenue from that loan program. I do think that artists want to ensure that there will be continued resources to help support the maintenance of the integrity of the collection and ensuring that we have the category A designation with respect to facilities that stores their artwork. I don't know, Rob, if you have more you'd like to add.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think, as the deputy indicated, so on average, about a little over $250,000 goes directly to Indigenous artists through this program. Combination of acquisitions and all the loans and exhibits, and the CARFAC kind of program is used to be able to allocate the appropriate amount of funds, royalties, if you will, to the artists. And under the modern, the external loan program, which is very different from this legacy internal loan program that operated from the 1960s to 2017, there is a chain of custody, there is protocol, standard operating procedures in place. The borrowers provide the funds directly to the artists. They have to have insurance for all of the items. There has to be a certain standard of handling of all of the artworks. So the legacy loan program and the current loan program that we operate are quite night and day. The audit period for this was from 2019 to 2024. Within the audit period, there were no items that were designated as unaccounted for. these are legacy issues that we're trying to reconcile now and trying to take that very seriously to reconcile what are important issues. But it is important to understand in a 5-year audit period, there were no artworks that were itemized as having gone missing during that period or unaccounted for during that period. So there is still room for improvement. We are leaning forward and trying to make those improvements. And a number of improvements have been made over the past number of months. And we took the results of the audit quite seriously and have tried to respond to those in a way that it meets the objective of whether we're talking about making sure that the storage is top quality, meeting category A and RCMP standards, whether the policies and standard operating procedures for the loan program are tightened up. So we are really trying to kind of make sure that we're running this in a professional manner.
So, Ms. Gideon, what we have heard from you is that according to the audit, there are 132 pieces that, I'll quote, works not accounted for. According to you, they're not missing, they're not lost, but according to the audit, they're unaccounted for. Word salad, right? A refusal to refer to really what's going on here because you don't want to use certain words. But at the end of the day, there are 132 pieces that are unaccounted for according to the audit. Has any initiative been taken to recover those 132 pieces?
I think I've mentioned several times that our team is looking at the reconciliation of those particular records and documents, which is what led them to be able to confirm the location of 12 pieces and that 20 of those pieces are also reproductions. I mean, those are active efforts. The reason that we're not changing the designation is because the exercise is not completed.
Sorry, this is my time, and I'll just interrupt you there. Thank you. According to the audit, the last location of many of these pieces is known. So what work has been done by you and your team to make sure that those pieces then can be recovered?
So the team is dedicated exactly to looking at identifying the location of those pieces by reviewing whether or not these records are duplicated from previous records held along with those that were transitioned into the information system in 2010. They're looking at photographs, they're looking at all of the records and documentation to be able to trace back where those
according to the audit and according to your own admission here today, it's known where these pieces last were. It seems rather simple then to be able to just simply go back to that source, knock on the door, pick up the phone, send an email, take some sort of initiative to make sure that those pieces are recovered. Has any of that been done?
So yes, as I mentioned before, when there was an identification that the loan program needed to be suspended, there was an effort to repatriate all of the artwork. The artwork was initially stored in our original building location of 10 Wellington, and we've had a transition into the Goldenrod Vault facility. So that is also part of the reconciliation efforts, is just to ensure that we have a very robust inventory management system.
So again, Ms. Gideon, how many of those pieces then have been repatriated? Only 12?
The 132 that have been identified in terms of their location, it is 12, but there were many more artworks that were repatriated that were part of the former internal loan program. I don't have the exact number of the full set of artwork that actually came back into the National Capital Region and is stored in our vault.
Let's not muddy the facts here. Out of 132, even though you know the last location where many of those art pieces were, only 12 have been recovered.
12, the location has been confirmed. It doesn't mean that it's not a recovery issue.
So it gets worse. It's not even that they've been brought back in. It's actually just simply that they've been located.
They're in the vault, but the issue is where we've been able to confirm that those pieces are no longer unaccounted for.
Okay, so 132 pieces gone, unaccounted for. Of those, 12 have been found and brought back in. That still leaves another 120 that are unaccounted for. There's no question there. It's just a statement. Those are the facts that have been laid out here today. That's incredibly shameful. And then what I hear you saying, Ms. Gideon and Mr. Wright, is don't worry, Canadians. It's only worth $49,000. Never mind the cultural value. Never mind our pursuit of reconciliation as a nation. Never mind any of that. It's just $49,000 worth of art. You shrug your shoulders and you pretend that it doesn't matter in comparison to the other $14 million worth of pieces that you have in your care. Is that what you're expecting of Canadians? They should just turn a blind eye to this.
What we are expecting is for Canadians to understand that the history of the collection and how the collection was built and what its original intent was. And for Canadians to know that we have modernized and are investing in the preserving the integrity of this collection in 2025 according to the standards of 2025
but
to
Ms. Gideon, I'll
avoid
just interrupt you
any
right there.
instances like this in the future.
There was a report done in 2013, another in 2017, another in 2019, and now in 2024. There's been ample time to correct this, Ms. Gideon. And no correction has been made. And today you've admitted that there are pieces that have been unaccounted for since the 1980s. And here we are in 2025, 40 plus years later. And those pieces are still not recovered, even though in many cases, according to the audit, the last location is known. That's despicable.
So can we talk, I think we need some clarity on what that regional loan program looked like. There was no intention to keep an eye on where these things went. They were purchased and then just sent around the country. And then at some point, there was a decision to say, okay, we want to have a collection. So it was actually turning into a collection that there was responsibility taken for these pieces, because up to that point, there was no responsibility for these. They were purchased and loaned. Is that the idea?
I'd say that's an accurate description of the fact that, the intention was to create opportunities for contemporary Indigenous art and bring value and revenue to artists by, instead of purchasing other art in federal offices, by actually purchasing art directly from Indigenous artists and displaying them in regional offices. But as the value of that collection grew, and also as just general standards changed in office buildings, where now there are much more rigorous and robust standards with respect to how art is displayed, acquired, displayed, maintained, insured in office settings. The department repatriated and brought back all of these artworks. And it did take years for that exercise, just going back to the previous question, because of the logistical complexity of also being able to safely transport artwork from across the country back into the National Capital Region. That was also a very resource-intensive exercise to then be able to establish it as a collection.
Associate, you've previously emphasized that economic reconciliation is about Indigenous communities determining their own priorities and strategies. When you testified in the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs, you stated, and I quote, "There are key components that drive our activities to work with Indigenous peoples to ensure that there's full participation in decision-making, that Indigenous peoples are able to enjoy their own means of subsistence and development, and that Indigenous peoples are able to determine their own priorities and strategies and to shape their own economic future." How is Indigenous self-determination reflected in decisions about storage, preservation, the accession, or the potential transfer of the collection?
Thank you very much for the question. So I think that is a very important point. So when the artworks are acquired, there's an Indigenous jury of expert artists who provide kind of advice on the artworks that would be acquired. Indigenous artists set their own price for the pieces of art that are acquired to make sure that it is a fair approach. When those works are acquired, there is now a kind of professional loan program. The Government of Canada doesn't charge any money for the loaning of these artworks, and that is to reduce the barrier to the loan of these artworks so that money will flow to the artists from the borrowing organization, whether that's a museum or a cultural institution. So I think, there are also support from Indigenous elders as part of the program to help ensure that, there are Indigenous elements at the heart of the program. Now, it is still administered by the Government of Canada, and I think it is important to consider whether in the future that can shift over time. And so that is something that we will be doing. As the Deputy Minister indicated earlier, we have to find the right balance between self-determination and stewardship of this very important collection. But I have confidence that can be done, and to make sure that the collection, this important collection as it is now, is retained as a collection. There's I think one other small point to make is that there are a number of partnerships that are done, and in fact last year there was a partnership with Parliament with the Senate of Canada, who acquired artwork through the program that we administer, and that is about helping to make sure that Indigenous art is in very important places across our country, and that it really does, the profile of Indigenous art is, I think, an important part of reconciliation and the partnership, but it also provides benefits directly to the artists as the profile is increased.
I share my colleague's concern. I mean, at the end of the day, you still have these works of art, and they've just gone missing. And there was no contract, apparently you're saying, that was created with regard to where those pieces went and under whose care they were put. And now, you just kind of shrug your shoulders and go, well, it's only $49,000 worth. Don't worry, folks. Look, I wonder if you would be willing to table with the committee the works that are unaccounted for.
Don't know, Rob, what your thoughts are. I mean, from my perspective, I think we are not able to, under the Access to Information Act, disclose the specifics with respect to the artwork and the artists. So I think that we would be able to share a list that would be quite generic, but we are not in a place where we would be able to share specifics with the committee.
Okay. Ms. Gideon, would you agree to go seek a legal opinion on that and return that legal opinion to this committee along with whatever you might be able to table in terms of that list of unaccounted works?
A legal opinion.
Yeah.
I have not sought legal advice with respect to this particular issue.
You're offering a legal opinion right now in terms of access to information. It's your opinion, and so I'm wondering if you're not able to provide this committee with a list of the unaccounted works, then the committee would request that you also supply us with a legal opinion.
I'm not offering a legal opinion. I am offering
Ms. Gideon.
an assessment by the Access to Information Act experts and team that we have about what our department can provide under the Act.
Will you agree to table with this committee a list of unaccounted works?
We've provided and are providing a response to an Access to Information Act request on this particular issue.
Ms. Gideon, you're not answering my question. Will you table with this committee a list of the unaccounted works?
I'm unable to table with this committee a list of unaccounted work that provides specifics with respect to the artists, anything that could disclose
why are you saying
the
to me that you are
proprietary
unable to
information of
provide
those
that?
artists.
And why are you saying to me that you are unable to provide that?
Because we've received advice from our Access to Information team about what can be provided publicly with respect to this information as a result of receiving a request.
So as a committee of Parliament, we do have the right to ask for such information, and there are certain laws that do not hinder us. So if you do not provide that list to us, then we would ask for a legal opinion. Is that understood?
I understand what you're saying to me.
Excellent. And is that agreed to?
I'm Not able to agree to that at this time. I do need to better understand what you're referring to in terms of the legal opinion and the legal basis. I am sharing with you that under the Access to Information Act, we are unable to provide that information.
Asked for today, then that would mean that there are legal grounds to deny us that. And so we would ask for that to be sent.
I appreciate that you've made a request to me. I do need time to be able to consider it and my response.
Okay, I'll allow the clerk to follow up on that. I don't think you understand how these requests work. The other thing that I would ask for you to table with this committee is the contract, a copy of the contract. If there was a past contract used for the loan program, we would ask for that. And my understanding, Mr. Wright, based on your testimony today, is that there is now a current loan program contract. And so we would ask for a copy of that contract as well. Again, if you refuse to provide this to the committee, then we would ask for your lawyer to send us a legal opinion with regards to why that information cannot be disclosed. The third thing that I would ask for you to table with this committee is which artists have works that have gone missing. And again, Ms. Gideon and Mr. Wright, if you are not able to table this information with this committee, as we are requesting you to do under parliamentary procedure, then we would ask that you provide a legal opinion as to why that information cannot be provided here today.